When Senator Cory Booker takes the mic, it's not about theatrics, it's about accountability. What unfolded in this tense exchange between Booker and Attorney General Pam Bondi was a profound illustration of the growing disconnect between what the Department of Justice claims to be doing and what its actions suggest about its real priorities. Booker's questioning cut to the heart of something bigger than grants or bureaucratic reshuffling. It was about values, priorities, and the moral compass of the nation's top law enforcement agency.
Attorney General, I know there's been a lot of talk about grants. I hate to bring you through this again, but it's really important to my state. New Jersey is one of the top 4 donor states in America, which means our taxpayers, Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, millions of people send more money down here than we get back in relative to all the other states in the nation except for 3 others. We've been talking a lot about different grants. I want to be very specific about Office of Justice Program grants. There were $35 million worth of grants that were approved in a bipartisan way in this committee, grants that invest in things that are really vital to the public safety of our community. I know, again, we are in a room full of people who want to see crime go down. Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement officers have spoken to the urgency of these programs which deal with school violence, which divert people into substance abuse and treatment and supportive services, community violence intervention programs, again, bipartisan programs that this committee really worked hard on this. I've heard what you've said to others on the committee. I heard what you said to Patty Murray in an appropriations committee that members should reach out to you if they want those grants reinstated. I've written letters, but I am hoping that you and I can have a conversation. $35 million of frozen funding for public safety that the people of New Jersey, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, really invested in those resources, those programs, and those nonprofits who were expecting those grants often made outlays and are now really in a lurch. Can we talk about those grants and the restoration of them, please?
Yeah, and Senator Booker, I had stated earlier that yes, we did terminate grants. We have an appeal process. We have turned some back on. We are appealing. We are looking at some. Some we have denied. Some are still pending. I believe we have multiple appeals pending with New Jersey, and I would be happy to sit down with you and look at those appeals. I believe one is with the city of New Jersey. I know there are multiple ones pending, but of course, I would be happy to sit down with you or any senator or any House member and look at grants that have been terminated. I've been doing that, and I would welcome that.
But I will be the first one you sit down with, correct?
Absolutely. I'd love to sit down with you on that. I'll look at those tomorrow, Senator Booker.
Thank you very much. I want to move on.
We have been restoring some grants.
I understand,
some have been denied, some have not.
At New Jersey, none have, and I really want to get to the bottom of that and hoping that we can reinstate some of those grants. The second thing I want to move on to is that earlier this year, the Department of Justice charged Newark Mayor Ras Baraka after he sought access to Delaney Hall Detention Center to conduct oversight. The charges on their face, to many of us, especially in New Jersey, were clearly baseless. Many people say they're politically motivated. And then the judge, the federal judge, admonished the prosecutors for even bringing the case. This is the quote from the federal judge. Federal prosecutors serve a single paramount client, justice itself. Your role is not to secure convictions at all costs, nor to satisfy public clamor, nor to advance political agendas. The federal judge went on to call the charges embarrassing and a worrisome misstep. Mayor Baraka was arrested that day on the scene, and I know you understand this, to arrest a mayor of a major city on charges that were called by a federal judge embarrassing and a worrisome misstep is very concerning to me, and I think should be to the whole committee. A recently released video shows a federal agent telling fellow officers that the decision to arrest Baraka was, quote, per the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, and I'm assuming that person is Todd Blanche. This is evidence to me that this decision wasn't made by people on the ground in the field, but by Maine Justice, that they were directing an arrest from D.C. on the scene. And it leads to the conclusion that this was a political decision, that the decision to arrest was not made by the people who were there on the spot. And I can assume that you can see how that's problematic to me. So I have questions not about the case, but really about how the decisions to arrest and charge Baraka and now McIver, Congresswoman McIver, were really made. Before this committee, I am saying that I'm going to submit these questions for the record, and I'm really hoping that we can understand how those decisions, as our oversight, how we're making decisions, especially for high-level officials in my state, the mayor of our largest city, the congressperson of that city, and I'm hoping that you could respond to those letters on the record.
Yeah, and Senator, that matter is ongoing, and so I can't discuss it. As an attorney, you realize I can't discuss an ongoing matter.
And I respect that. I guess I just want to know, and we'll leave this for the questions for the record about the decisions on how they're being made, not the case in itself. I want to move on. And again, I've heard your testimony so far. I know that there is data about violent crime in this city, but I'm really concerned about the application of Justice Department resources towards the challenges we have. You and I both know that about 11,000 Americans have been killed by a firearm just this year. The Department of Justice, according to the White House's own documents, as well as that of the conservative think tank Cato, have shown that there has been a significant movement of law enforcement resources away from many other issues and into immigration enforcement. And we are seeing that in that immigration department, a lot of the people are not the violent criminals that we are really needing to rid our streets of. In total, according to the Cato Institute, you've reassigned 7,460 law enforcement away from their primary duties, investigating drug traffickers, prosecuting child pornography, targeting high-value white-collar criminals, and again, forcing them, this is according to the Cato Institute, into low-level immigration enforcement. This includes, in terms of gun violence, 1,778 agents from the ATF to this kind of immigration enforcement. The White House itself has said that they diverted 45% of all of agents in 25 FBI field offices to work on immigration full-time. As a person who worked very closely in my time as mayor with the New Jersey field office, that's really concerning given the other threats. But it doesn't end there. The DOJ has eliminated the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, the independent component of the DOJ whose job it was to combat transnational organized crime, dissolved the Community Relations Service, which in New Jersey has been invaluable over 60 years, responding to communities experiencing conflict or violence, and something that people on both sides of the aisle of this committee have really invested in. You all have rescinded VOCA and VAWA grants to support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. There seems to be a disconnect here between the application of the resources of the Justice Department on the things that are most concerning when it comes to crime and where they're being directed instead.
Senator Booker, first to OCDEF. The most important point is that the work of OCDEF is continuing. The executive office is being dissolved. We have said that, but the work of OCDEF is continuing. The resources that were previously provided to law enforcement organizations through OCDEF are now going directly to those organizations. I will assure you, no work will be sacrificed as a result of getting rid of the executive office of OCDEF. The agents and the attorneys are working with Homeland Security. They're all working together as a unit.
Okay, Attorney General Bondi, I'm running out of time, and I'm going to put some questions in QFRs, because again, this is conservative think tanks and others are pointing about literally over 1,000 people being taken off of things that I think would concern the public. I'd like to get that, but I also just want to quickly mention that for the record, I want to ask about the public corruption unit as well. We now have gone from a public corrupt integrity section that went from 36 full-time prosecutors to now only 2. And yet we know, Democrats and Republicans, there is a real problem with public corruption in our country. And we know that the DOJ has stopped enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force, dismissed the indictment against Trump donor Andrew Weidenhorn, cut back on white-collar investigations. My list goes on. I'm running out of time. But I will ask for the record, again, not only reassigning officers and prosecutorial resources from the other things I mentioned, but public corruption is really important. I want to talk about an area of bipartisanship on this committee, which is antitrust. This is a very bipartisan area. In June, the Antitrust Division finalized a proposed consent decree with Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Networks, settling the DOJ's challenge to the company's $14 billion merger. Reportedly, your Chief of Staff, Chad Mizell, and Acting Deputy Attorney General Woodard overruled career antitrust staff and approved the merger. This is a massive area of concern for Americans writ large. This is an area where corporate power is growing, corporate concentration in our country is happening at great degree. I'm grateful that I, the ranking member with Mike Lee, on a committee that is really trying to get into this disturbing trend. And the issues right now in the Justice Department, the resources being put on it, and the appearance of improprieties that we're seeing are troubling. All I want to ask as my final question is, would you commit, just to talk about antitrust, to coming before the antitrust subcommittee led by Senator Lee to discuss antitrust enforcement in our country?
We're over time. May I answer, Chairman?
Yes.
Senator Booker, I work hand in hand with Gail Slater. She is doing an incredible job. I said that earlier. I will let Gail Slater handle all matters with antitrust. The HP matter, Juniper, is a pending matter still because, as you know, it has to go before the courts, even after a decision has been made, and that's where it's pending right now. If I can go back to your previous two questions, first about our agents being reassigned. Our agents are working tirelessly on their day jobs and with Homeland Security. And right now, they're not getting paid. And they're on the streets during a government shutdown working to keep every city in this country safe, in New Jersey and in every state. They're working together with DHS on task forces, but they're also doing their core mission, and they're getting child predators off the street. They are working so hard with all the agencies, hand in hand. That has not been sacrificed. And I'm so proud of the work that the FBI, DEA, ATF are doing. ATF agents have worked tirelessly. I am in constant contact with them on the incredible cases that they're making to keep our country safe and our world safe, especially our DEA agents who are stationed around this world, and now they're not getting paid. Back to the public integrity section, the last point you made. It has not been slashed. Those are going to the various U.S. attorney offices to be handled in each office around the country instead of one unit based in D.C.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Before Blackburn, my Democrat colleagues continue to criticize the DOJ for their role in President Trump's historic immigration crackdown. They've talked about due process. They've talked about the lack of transparency and oversight.
Let's break this down. Booker started by raising an issue that hits home for every taxpayer, especially those in states like New Jersey, which send far more money to Washington than they ever get back. He pointed out that $35 million in bipartisan-approved Justice Department grants had been frozen, money meant to protect communities, reduce violence, support victims of abuse, and keep neighborhoods safe. These weren't partisan pet projects. These were programs rooted in public safety, community trust, and evidence-based prevention. What makes this moment so telling is how Booker framed it, not as a Democratic grievance, but as an American one. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, we all invested in these programs, he said. That's the essence of good governance, accountability that transcends party lines. Pam Bondi's response was evasive, familiar, and frustratingly bureaucratic. Yes, some grants were cut, some might be reinstated, there's an appeals process. But Booker's persistence exposed a pattern. Vital public safety programs are being defunded while political priorities take center stage. Then Booker shifted to an even more alarming issue: political prosecutions. He questioned the Justice Department's decision to arrest Newark's mayor Ras Baraka, an arrest later deemed embarrassing and a worrisome misstep by a federal judge. For context, Ras Baraka isn't just any mayor. He's a respected leader who has worked to rebuild one of America's most diverse and resilient cities. Booker cited evidence suggesting that this arrest wasn't a local law enforcement call. It came directly from Washington, from the Deputy Attorney General's office. That revelation matters because it raises a deeply troubling possibility: the Justice Department being used as a political weapon against Democratic leaders. When federal prosecutors start targeting public officials based on politics rather than proof, we're crossing into dangerous territory. The kind of territory where justice becomes selective, where power dictates prosecution. Booker wasn't just asking for answers, he was fighting for the integrity of justice itself. His line, "Federal prosecutors serve one client, justice itself," wasn't just a reminder to Bondi, it was a warning to the nation. Then came another layer: misplaced priorities within the DOJ. Booker cited data showing that thousands of agents, over 7,000, according to the conservative Cato Institute, had been pulled from critical tasks like investigating drug trafficking, child exploitation, and white-collar crime, and reassigned to low-level immigration enforcement. Think about that. Agents trained to stop cartels, human traffickers, and corrupt officials were being redirected to enforce political talking points about the border. This is what happens when ideology replaces evidence. Booker also pointed to the dismantling of key DOJ divisions. The Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, once the cornerstone of fighting transnational criminal networks. The Community Relations Service, vital for easing racial tensions and preventing violence in divided communities. The VOCA and VAWA grants, which directly support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. All of these are programs with real human impact, programs that save lives, rebuild trust, and promote justice. Cutting them isn't just bad policy, it's a betrayal of the DOJ's fundamental mission. And then Booker did something quintessentially Booker. He zoomed out. He raised the alarm about the collapse of the DOJ's Public Corruption Unit, once staffed with 36 prosecutors, now down to just 2. 2 prosecutors to police corruption across an entire federal government. That's not an accident, that's a choice. This gutted division once held officials accountable regardless of party. It enforced the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, pursued foreign influence operations, and upheld ethics in public office. Its disappearance means fewer checks on corruption and more room for abuse of power. Booker wasn't just asking for answers, he was fighting for the integrity of justice itself. His line, "Federal prosecutors serve one client, justice itself," wasn't just a reminder to Bondi, it was a warning to the nation. Then came another layer, misplaced priorities within the DOJ. Booker cited data showing that thousands of agents, over 7,000 according to the conservative Cato Institute, had been pulled from critical tasks like investigating drug trafficking, child exploitation, and white-collar crime, and reassigned to low-level immigration enforcement. Think about that. Agents trained to stop cartels, human traffickers, and corrupt officials were being redirected to enforce political talking points about the border. This is what happens when ideology replaces evidence. Booker also pointed to the dismantling of key DOJ divisions. The Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, once the cornerstone of fighting transnational criminal networks. The Community Relations Service, vital for easing racial tensions and preventing violence in divided communities. The VOCA and VAWA grants, which directly support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. All of these are programs with real human impact, programs that save lives, rebuild trust, and promote justice. Cutting them isn't just bad policy, it's a betrayal of the DOJ's fundamental mission. And then Booker did something quintessentially Booker. He zoomed out. He raised the alarm about the collapse of the DOJ's Public Corruption Unit, once staffed with 36 prosecutors, now down to just 2. 2 prosecutors to police corruption across an entire federal government. That's not an accident, that's a choice. This gutted division once held officials accountable regardless of party. It enforced the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, pursued foreign influence operations, and upheld ethics in public office. Its disappearance means fewer checks on corruption and more room for abuse of power.
Booker ended by underscoring an area of bipartisan agreement, antitrust enforcement. In an era where corporate monopolies control everything from technology to groceries, he pointed to a DOJ decision that appeared to overrule career experts to approve a controversial merger. That's not just a corporate issue, that's about democracy itself. Because when corporations become too powerful to regulate, public power shrinks. And what did Bondi do? She dodged again, deflected to staff, and painted a picture of business as usual. But Booker's subtext was clear. Business as usual is the problem. At its core, this hearing was about what justice means in America today. Is it about fairness, equity, and public protection, or is it about political power and selective enforcement? Booker made the case that justice without integrity isn't justice at all. What makes this exchange so vital is that it wasn't about partisan points. It was about a senator demanding that the Department of Justice live up to its name. Booker reminded us that the DOJ's job isn't to serve presidents or parties, it's to serve the people. And in that moment, he spoke not just for New Jersey, but for every community that depends on a justice system that protects rather than punishes for politics. Because when justice becomes conditional, democracy itself becomes fragile. And that's what Booker was fighting to prevent, a government that forgets who it's supposed to serve. So as viewers, this isn't just a story about one senator versus one attorney general. It's a call to all of us to demand transparency, fairness, and integrity in the institutions meant to uphold our rights. The strength of our democracy depends on it. If you believe justice should serve people, not power, then this is the fight we all share. Keep paying attention, demand accountability, and don't let political noise drown out the voices calling for truth. Because when leaders like Cory Booker fight for justice, they're fighting for us all.